The reason for a guitar player to play rhythm is that he's not good enough to play solos. But that's okay, because we still need rhythm guitar players in order for us lead players to really shine. Yeah, that's how I thought when I was 15 years old. I wish I knew then what I know today about rhythm guitar. Now, there's a reason why I thought that. I started playing in 1994, and at the time, I was a big fan of hard rock bands. Guns N' Roses, Aerosmith, Metallica. I just love those bands, and that's really what drew me to guitar. Now, the thing is, each of those bands that I mentioned had two guitar players, the rhythm guitar player and the lead guitar player. And so because all I listened to was those kind of bands, the idea that you needed to have a rhythm guitar player and a lead player really got ingrained in my mind. Something else got ingrained in my mind, and it's the idea that lead guitar players are better guitar players. I think there are several reasons for that. First of all the guitar magazines I would read at the time focused heavily on those lead players. Those were the guys who made the cover of the magazines. Therefore, that kind of contributed to the idea that I had that if you wanted to be a good player, you wanted to be a lead guitar player. I think another reason was that at the time when I wanted to learn a song, it was way easier for me to play something that people would recognize by playing the rhythm part. Combined to that, the fact that I was a typical teenager wanting to fit in, wanting to be cool, and because those lead guitar players were always at the forefront of anything guitar related, that's what I wanted to be. So for all those reasons, I focused heavily on lead guitar. That's all I did. I would memorize solos note per note. I learned licks, scales, get into theory, speed development, and this lasted for over a decade. So I had become what I wanted to become, a lead guitar player. Here's the thing, my rhythm playing sucked. I had not developed my rhythm playing past the bar chords, but no one could ever tell because any band I joined, I made sure that I was gonna be the lead player and also made sure that we'd have a rhythm guitar player so I would not have to worry about that stuff. And this lasted 4 years. I just focused on lead guitar, but everything changed. March 19th, 1998, the day I heard this. Now, this was not the first time I ever heard Hendrix, but it was the very first time I really paid attention to what the guy was playing. I don't know why it took me so long to realize that Hendrix was doing it all at the same time. He was the lead player, but also an amazing rhythm player. And all of that flawlessly mixed to make music. I mean, listen to this. It's rhythm, but it's not the kind of rhythm I had in mind. See, for all these years focusing so heavily on lead guitar, I thought that rhythm was boring. I had passed the stage of being a rhythm guitar player. I knew my chords, and I moved on to something a little more interesting. But this was different. This was the kind of thing I wanted to learn. I wanted to play that. It sounded so cool, so interesting. So I got to work. Now, because anytime I picked up the guitar, I focused on techniques, licks, solos, I didn't know where to start. I mean, I hadn't practiced rhythm for so many years. See, on one hand, I didn't really want to start from scratch because I had already acquired some basic rhythm skills. I knew the open chords, I knew my bar chords, but on the other hand, those early day rhythm skills I had developed had nothing to do with what I was hearing on these Hendrix songs. So my first step was just to learn some of those songs Hendrix was playing. I started with Little Wing, and that turned out to be a great choice because the chords are fairly simple and it kind of gave me a canvas on which I could build on. And then I learned other bits and pieces from other songs I liked. The Wind Cries Mary was one of them, and that was really cool because I started recognizing some patterns, fills, things that Jimmy was doing over certain chord shapes. And once I started recognizing some of these typical Hendrix moves that he would do over certain chord shapes, I started exploring on my own. So this is what I did. I started with a simple chord shape, a bar chord because I could move it around, and then started adding to that chord a little bit of rhythm, a little bit of groove. And once I got a good groove going on, I started injecting some of those moves that Hendrix would do over that. There's a lot of hammer-ons and pull-offs, a lot of slides. And eventually, I realized that those additional fills that I was doing, those embellishments, were part of the minor pentatonic scale. And that is great because it was the first time that I was able to bridge the gap that I had between rhythm and lead playing. This helped me in finding new fills to do, because now that I made that connection between rhythm and lead, I could incorporate all those things that I had been working on for so many years into my rhythm playing. Now here's what's interesting, and I'm sure it happened to you before. When you discover something new, not necessarily a musical concept, it could be a new word. Once you learn a new word and its definition, you start hearing it everywhere. And that happened to me because I started recognizing that new type of playing rhythm in a lot of other bands. Once I got to a point where I felt that I had enough rhythm vocabulary to use those bar chords and start making simple chord progressions, I decided to go a little bit further with more complex chord shapes. So I grabbed the real book, just opened a page randomly, put my finger on a chord, figured out how to play that chord, and then I started exploring. This led to new discoveries. It led me to think a little bit outside of the box because some of these chord shapes didn't really fit some of the typical pentatonic scales that I had used for so many years. And I eventually figured out that instead of thinking of pentatonic scales, I could think of arpeggios. And it's through that process that I started seeing the fretboard in a different way. See, prior to this renewed love for rhythm guitar, I only saw the fretboard as one big scale. You know, I'd start improvising using the first position of the minor pentatonic, and then move on to the second position. The third was a little more complex, but it was all part of that same minor pentatonic scale. But now is starting to see that each chord shape could have their own set of assigned notes, their own scales. I didn't know it at the time, but that new way of visualizing the fretboard would also have a profound impact on the way I improvised. And it turns out that two of my favorite guitar players play that way too, David Gilmour and Jeff Beck. And in this video, you'll discover what that new way of playing lead guitar is.